Scottish Health and Safety here. Which is starting with, who's starting, Christine?
So I'll just speak to the first few slides. So can we just pop to the next one? So through the long-term plan process already, we've been talking a little bit about action and investment plans. So way back, we gave you an overview about how all of this fitted with the vision and the outcome statements, and then how strategies fit, and then how the action and investment plans sit underneath those. The action and investment plans, many of them were done in quite a strong engagement process with the community, not all, but many, and they cover the whole range of the community outcomes. In the last LTP, the Commission went through and identified what they thought they considered were their priorities, and then they were incorporated into the LTP, and we prepared, and it's sitting on our website. It is a document that shows all of the actions, because those still actions that are considered to be required or appropriate to achieve the overall outcomes, but just there's insufficient capacity in the overall budget to do so. And then of those actions, which ones have been prioritised for funding and delivery within the long-term plan period. So we're not really, as we've worked through this, we've identified for you which action investment plans need updating, and they've been coming to you progressively. This is really looking at and trying to get some direction. First to give you an understanding of how the action investment plan actions are flowing into the LTP, and getting a bit of a steer from you about what your view is about what's priority and what should be in there. The steers that you give us today doesn't mean it's going straight, it's got a fast track into the LTP. That means that it will be picked up and go through into the prioritisation process, and you will still look at it in terms of your whole picture, and at another point you might decide that yes, some of these things definitely will proceed, and you may decide that there are other more pressing or prioritised investments from the wider package of LTP work that you want to proceed in advance of some of these AIP actions. So it's not predetermined, but it is determining what goes into that mix, and that when we bring it back to you, we are saying you'd given us a strong steer or a direction that you wanted these things included, and that's why these are coming through, and we'll be much more transparent about those ones as to whether or not from the executive are able to fit them up above the line, or whether that they are falling below the line, so that you can make the call as to whether you're comfortable with that or not. So that's really, so we're trying to get a feel. There is a mix in this conversation about capital, which will flow through the capitalisation process, but probably the other key area is operational, and we'll take the direction that you're giving us and flow it into the activity area plans and the operational budgets that will come through into the long-term plan process. So
Christine, so we've got, I think, 36 AIPs on the website, just counted them. Yep. So can we at some stage just get a table of these are the 36 and whether we're actually talking about them in the long-term plan, or, because you said some we're going to do and some we're not, just because we do, I think we talk about 107 of them at some stage, and it's just, I would quite like just to always be able to refer back to which ones we're doing and which are being impacted by the LTP.
So I'm just looking at Sarah. Once we've got a draft budget, because it's still moving, one, because we don't have all of your direction yet, and because we don't know how it's all coming together in terms of the total cost, but once we've got to a point where it's stopped moving, as a draft, we should be able to, just looking at Sarah, would it be possible we could work with finance to pull together?
I don't even need the numbers. These are the 36 that are sitting here.
Yep, we could do
these
that.
are ones we're talking about.
Yes.
We get it.
Yes.
This workshop just said we're looking at AIPs, and I would have liked to think, well, which ones are we looking at? And then you'll say, we've done that already, and I'll forget when we've done it. So really just a work plan.
We are also planning for the City Future Committee the 13th of October to bring a strategy stocktake wrap-up report that has that table of all of them, sort of summary of what we've talked about, where they're at. I mean, most of them will be feeding into the LTP, and there was an attachment of the ones we had excluded today and why. So sometimes that was because they were being talked about somewhere else. So for example, we haven't included waters plans or transport plans because they've been presented to you separately. So today is sort of the mop-up of anything that hasn't been covered elsewhere. But yeah, we can definitely pull that all together into one place.
To every meeting and said, okay, we talked about this and it only needs to be, if we had it now and then it was updated for October, that's fine. But it just, you guys know, you're way more familiar with them than certainly I am. So it would just be useful to always have a guide of which ones we're talking about.
Yep, we can pull it all together.
Thank you, that'd be great. Thanks.
Placemats effectively of some of those key things. So we could even do
good.
that so it sits there if that's something you want.
Well,
So
just an
absolutely.
A3 is just lovely. Thank
Okay,
you.
so that's really what the slide's talking about. You confirmed your strategic direction. We've done a whole lot of stop tape work. That's been coming back to you in a series of papers to the City Futures Committee. And now we're taking that work and moving it forward to prioritisation, which will flow into the LTP. So if we move to the next slide. As Sarah said, we are covering today AIPs that aren't addressed in other ways. So you've got a session on walking and cycling, you've got a session on transport. We're not going to replicate all of that. It's really the ones that don't come through any of those other processes that we just wanted to make sure you were familiar with. And we've got down the bottom what we're successes look like, that you provide your direction on these ones, that you understand how this whole process fits together, you're aware of the issues and how that's shaping into the long-term plan, you understand the AIPs and how they flow into the capital program, and if you've got any particular direction, that you give that to us now so we can flow it through. That's really all today. You've given us some feedback you'd like this to be relatively condensed, so we have shrunk our slide pack and
You've condensed it.
and we've condensed it, so hopefully it meets your needs. So we'll just truck on. So we're working through the following AIPs, just a magic, we'll move one slide. So these are the ones that we're going to cover today, and each of the teams will come and speak to it. So yeah, we'll just try to keep things moving. So we'll start, the first one we just want to start off with is the spatial plans. And it is a bit of a context setter because a lot of the other AIPs that follow will in some way implement some of the spatial plans. So we thought it was a good overarcher to start with because community development, spaces and places, some of the climate matters are also relevant in terms of the spatial plans. So I'll hand over to Carl.
Kia ora koutou. I think everyone knows who I am. Lead the structure plan team, but in my previous role, I'd led the urban communities team and was responsible for leading the preparation of our local spatial plans. So as Christine said, this is probably a little bit more of a scene setting, and the more substantive, I guess, discussions around projects and so forth will follow in the conversations today and some of your other workshops. As part of the AIP reporting to date, you did receive, I guess, an update on our stock take around these local spatial plans. And I guess what we found in a nutshell was that the strategic direction remains relevant and appropriate, but it is about ongoing, I guess, testing of the priorities and the actions within the context of those spatial plans. So, I mean, I'm touching on the spatial plans, I guess, as well as, the various conversations around spaces and places, transport and so forth. There are other overlapping discussions occurring through this LTP process, such as around intensification, affordable housing, development incentives and so forth, and those will be specific LTP workshops sessions coming forward as well. So just to note that. So in terms of the spatial plans...
So what were those things that you said are specific? We're talking spatial plans, but you said intensification and...
intensification, affordable housing, development incentives, and those, I guess, that intensification development incentives also have a direct overlap with the city centre.
So they'll be separate, and this is where I'd like my schedule to be able to say, well, we're doing those separately.
So they're in the issues list, so we could bring you back, and we're tracking the issues list. So remember a couple of council meetings ago you signed it off, but we can bring that to you. I'm just looking at...
I just need a roadmap of
so we're absolutely
this next 3 months
so
are looking like.
yes,
Yeah.
yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
Excellent. So we've got 3 local spatial plans. I keep calling them local so we don't get confused with the regional spatial plan discussions you're having.
Tauranga is fine.
Yep, Tauranga spatial plans. So the Te Papa spatial plan for the peninsula, that was developed and endorsed in 2020. It was prepared in tandem with a program business case, I guess a land use and transport program business case with partners, Regional Council and Waka Kotahi. So that brought, I guess, an additional level of evidence to that process. Automaitai and that broader peninsula, Brookfield and so forth, followed in 2023, and then the Mount to Arataki area in 2024. And I'll touch on a bit more detail in a moment. So it's got 6 slides. If we can go to the next
So
one.
what are your colours on that?
Oh, sorry. So in terms of the image that's shown there, what we've done is we've got the spatial plan outline areas shown, but we've overlaid it on top of the current district plan map. And I guess the importance of that, so through Plan Change 33 and our intensification or enabling housing plan change, there has been significant upzoning of this land, or of these areas, which followed on from through the spatial plan development. So I guess in terms of the significance of the colours, what you see is if you look at Te Papa, that has, in terms of the orange, that's your higher density zoning areas, and so you see quite a significant amount through the Te Papa area. Within the Automaitai area, you see that around the centres of Brookfield, Cherrywood and Beretta, and then also, if you're looking at the Mount, you see it around the Mount area and down around Arataki. So I guess what it's really signalling is these are the areas that we are enabling intensification to occur within our city centre.
This exists now,
This exists
and we
now.
need to think, are we going to change this?
Not so much, no. I think really where it's at is this is, over the past few years through plan change or through the spatial plan processes and through the Plan Change 33, we have seen this growth enabled, and it's now about, I guess by following the intent of the spatial plans is to continue to support how this growth occurs moving forward. So it's enabled, and it's now, there are ongoing discussions around investment to continue to support that growth.
And you talked about that this is overlaid with the district plan. Where does the district plan fit in?
So the district plan is what enables our growth. So the zoning enables that medium density, that high density, and allows that growth to occur. And then it's, alongside that, it's what other levers council can pull to encourage, to facilitate and enable. And
So
how
where does the district plan fit in our AIPs?
it doesn't. It sits along the side. It's a separate. Yeah. Okay. Next slide, please. So the purpose of our spatial plans is they provide a 30-year blueprint to support existing and future growth, but importantly within that they very much have a 10-year focus, 10-year action plan. And to date that has supported development of our long-term plans by understanding where those actions are, those priorities, and then looking to how we fund those going forward. They are an integrated approach to urban form, transport, community amenities and culture and identity, and so very much providing for growth around our centres, putting actions forward how we support that growth in terms of the level of service around transport, movement, open space and community amenities and so forth. I think what's really important is each of these spatial plans took between a year and 18 months to develop, and that was because of the significant engagement that was undertaken with mana whenua, with our communities, with key stakeholders, businesses and so forth. And I just really want to emphasise, it was significant engagement. We went through multiple rounds, workshops and so forth. So the community, those who were involved will have a sense of ownership over that. Mana whenua definitely have a sense of ownership over these spatial plans. and the actions do represent what we heard from the communities at the time.
And so the next 10, in our long-term plan, when do we decide that we're going to do some new spatial plans for Papamoa or Welcome Bay? When's that discussion happening?
So I think there's two aspects. There is an aspect of saying, well, over the coming year or so, do you want to revisit these and the actions? And I think it's probably more at the action end. But really from council, I guess we're happy to bring a discussion back around any other areas that you would want to look at going forward. I guess we would need to outline where we see maybe the most need. But I think it's also in the context of, each area is different, so what do you want to achieve in that area and what's important? These spatial plans were premised, I guess, on building on our smart growth strategy and where we foresee intensification occurring and to support that intensification. So each community probably has will have different needs.
So we're talking about the next 10 years in a long-term plan. You're suggesting that these have been done with lots of consultation, so you mightn't want to change, but how do we start thinking about what actions, what investment we might need in Welcome Bay, for example, which doesn't that need to start with a spatial plan? So this is where we sometimes don't get told early enough that, we'll get told in 3 years' time, the long-term plan didn't include a spatial plan for Welcome Bay, so it's not in there. So when do we get that thinking ahead part of it?
Yep, if council is looking to have that discussion, then we'd need to bring that back, I think, as a separate paper to outline what that process might look like, what it involves, I guess, starting to bring back what we understand the key issues might be in some of those areas. And you would need to think about, the prioritisation of that, what you're looking to get out of it. So it's a separate discussion, and it would require some separate time and input to have that. And I would imagine and Christine can jump in here, but it's probably less about informing this LTP as it is about informing ongoing planning.
No, we quite often get told you can't do that, it's not the LTP, so I don't want to find. Rod, then Glenn.
That's a good point, and I was going to sort of ask the question about coordination. You do these different areas in isolation. How do you get the overlap, if you like? But I think there's probably room for us to have a session where we talk about Welcome Bay, Papamoa, parts of Tauriko that maybe aren't in that, just to see if there's anything that I know you can't probably do a full spatial plan between now and March. You definitely can't, but we could have a discussion and just maybe pick out some big points that maybe we need to put in the LTP discussion. I'm sure Hatapu's got some things around supermarkets and that he'd love to add to the mix.
Well, even if it's just the fact that the LTP does enable spatial plans for the whole city to happen, then you're just not, it's not got a budget attached, but it's just, then it's not, no, you can't do that, it's not the LTP. Glenn?
Maybe staff can clarify, and it might become clearer from the slide on the 10-year allocations, but my understanding is that you did a scan across the city and looked at housing intensification opportunities, and there was the REL, what is that, realistically realised? Well, anyway, the realisable yields, and that led to 3 areas being the focus for housing intensification. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I understood that drove those 3 spatial plans to be the focus, and they do take a bit of work and money. And then the other areas, which you can see on that slide, have lower growth, that they didn't justify a spatial plan, but it didn't, at the time, my understanding was it didn't preclude strategic conversations around investment in those areas. It was just whether to do it under the umbrella of a spatial plan. Maybe you can clarify, Chris.
I was going to say something similar. So the spatial plans were identified in areas that were going to deliver a reasonably large quantity of intensification over a longer period of time, and to achieve that needed quite a range of investment to facilitate the level of density that was anticipated. That's not to say that you're not making investments in other parts and other suburbs of the city, and that comes through the other processes, and we're very it's a good idea to have a conversation about what investments you're making in other places. I don't think they necessarily justify the level of investment that you would do to do a spatial plan, because that's got quite a lot of technical work and it doesn't need it for the level of development that would likely occur. What we have done in the past in long-term plans, once you've got it more shaped up, is we have done effectively a geographical mapping of investments, so you can look at any particular suburb or area and sort of see in the LTP, in this area, Welcome Bay, for example, we've got these traffic projects and there's water projects and this community development projects, so that you can look at that as a whole. But if you wanted to have a conversation about what might be some of your key investments, and it's probably when Ross talks about community and open spaces and the community team to talk about what they're doing, they are generally in the suburban areas. So yeah, I would suggest spend your money on delivering actions, not delivering another spatial plan in another location. You don't need to have a spatial plan to invest.
Except we've got Papamoa with Tutumu and Wairaki and land that's potentially zoned differently to allow housing or sporting. So it's like that's one I just would.
Andy might talk to that. We do have quite comprehensive separate what we call greenfield spatial planning, but that's the difference.
Yeah, so in those newer parts of the city, including some parts of the city which are now probably considered older, like say Bethlehem or the older parts of Papamoa, they're guided by structure plans, so a different type of spatial planning, which is sort of infrastructure focused, transport through waters, but also parks, reserves and community infrastructure. There are obviously some specific issues that exist in those areas, such as what council might do with its surplus land around the PEI, and those issues are on the LTP issues list, and we'll come back with specific workshop sessions or issues and options papers. So I guess if there are still things that are missing from that list that are important considerations, I guess it's never too late to add them on, particularly at this stage of the process.
So to Rod's point, we've got spatial plans, a district plan, structure plans. Again, to my point, it's, if we're wanting to plan the city well, we sort of need to know how they all do fit in. So those structure plans, are they coming back on LTP or where do they fit in?
Yeah, so the structure plans that were sort of developed alongside the rezoning of these new areas, so they deal largely with that integration of land use and infrastructure. They generated a range of infrastructure projects that are required to enable urbanisation of those areas. So those projects that haven't yet been delivered out of those structure plans come back to you through the transport activity, the parks and reserves activity,
But we don't see them
activity.
at here, at this level. We just see them at the level of activity within them.
Yeah.
And that's something I think we miss out. I think it would be great to have a structure, this is Tauranga, and this is where we've got structure plans, these are spatial plans, and in the structure plans, where are we talking about the investment in Welcome Bay versus Bethlehem?
Cool. So we had a workshop with you around your focus on growth in terms of LTP investment, and one of the principles that was endorsed was that you'd continue to support those existing greenfield areas. So I guess the assumption that we're working on is all those projects across those different infrastructure activities will be incorporated into that first kind of cut of the...
You don't give us that holistic view of what does it all look like, where you pick out assumptions about one or the other thing without us saying, what does that look like for the city as a whole? And that's what I miss.
So we have brought you previously diagrams about how all of I think what we're missing is the diagrams of all the planning links together. So I think and it may be a while since we've done that. So we probably just need to bring those diagrams back because it is a giant jigsaw and they all fit together.
Right.
And
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I think if we bring back the diagrams...
What are we going to call it? The giant
giant jigsaw. To call it the giant jigsaw, we will bring back the diagrams of the giant jigsaw.
Giant planning jigsaw.
And it may have been earlier on in your term, and so I think it's one of those things that we probably do need to keep refreshing. So we'll do something on that and bring you something back.
Thank you. Yeah, because I just don't want assumptions to be pulled from a little activity here about something, and then you say, no, that's what you decided down here when we didn't understand what the holistically or strategically that meant for our city. Sorry.
Sorry, just a quick one. So we've had these spatial plans and they were consulted on well. When you get to the long-term plan again, do you actually go back and revisit and talk to people about whether they're actually doing what we thought they'd do and reassess them, or is it too early in the process to do that?
Well, we haven't gone out for specific engagement on the spatial plans as such, but we are continuously engaging with members of the community in terms of a lot of those actions and so forth. So I think we do have a good feel, and then through your long-term plan process and the investment decisions you're making, it does provide that opportunity for others to submit in that context.
So I guess, for example, what I'm meaning is we did Otomotai in 2023, I think it was. And you said there was consultation there, but do we put a marker in that each long-term plan looks at how it's going and whether it's going off the rails, and then might have an opinion on that?
Yes, as part of previous reporting to the committee, there was a stock take undertaken, and I guess what we can tell we can see for Te Papa in particular that we are seeing significant delivery of the actions within the Te Papa area. What we have seen for Otomaitai, probably slightly lesser extent for the Mount, is that the delivery of the actions is less so. So we are able to give you that I guess gauge on how well we're going against those actions. It probably does correlate when I say give you those figures, that it correlates with the growth that's occurring in those areas as well. We're seeing more in Te Papa.
So is what you're asking though, do we ask the people, is it working for you, or are we just saying?
And then do you slightly shift your direction depending on the answer?
Yeah, I think we're saying we've done a stock take, we're putting in place, but then we've put these in place. Are they working, or
So we are monitoring through our LTP KPIs and so forth, and the spatial plans themselves had KPIs. Those are effectively have informed the LTP KPIs, and we are monitoring against that, and also in terms of our Tauranga community surveys to get an understanding.
Christine's suggesting that if we keep asking questions on slide 3, we won't get to the end. So can it wait, Glenn? Yeah, great.
Okay. Look, I think at this point what I want to really emphasise is that the spatial plans have been developed in those areas where we expect the most growth within the city, and I guess reflecting Councillor Carruthers' comments earlier, there is a science behind this in terms of providing for that growth around our centres, close to the city, city centre and so forth, to get the best, I guess, bang for buck per se and efficiencies. Just what this slide is showing is just some of the layers that sit within our spatial plans. So we worked very hard with Mana Whenua in terms of our cultural mapping and engaging with them to work through various actions and to, I guess, understand the place better and so forth. We have worked the middle slide, so that's the left image, the middle image of Otomaitai. Really what that's showing is that those areas where intensification was proposed, and that's now being brought through Plan Change 33 and enabled through our city plan. So that's key areas where we expect to see growth. And then on the right hand side is a example of a transport plan, and again that's where we've worked hard with our partners, with staff to put forward, I guess, those transport related actions to support that growth. And so you'll be having those conversations with the transport team around the funding of within these areas moving forward. But I think it's important they all note their involvement here. So yeah, this has been a stepping stone in the development of a lot of the actions and the investment proposed.
But if we had a spatial plan 2023, I think you had one, and by 2027 the intensification hadn't happened, how do you go about then saying, well, that didn't work, what do we do instead?
I think there's a number of aspects here. I mean, we work within a market that has ups and downs, but I think as discussed at one of the previous workshops, we generally end up back on the medium run and the average. So we just got to take that into account. Growth, and I made a note in here, we have evidence, and talking with our developer community and others, you need to invest to encourage growth. So in those areas that are being invested in, where level of services are improving and so forth, those are the areas that we are most likely to see growth. And then it does come back to some of the other conversations we will continue to have around intensification and so forth, and what levers we can pull. Yeah. Next slide, please. So I won't read this out a bit, but there are notable outcomes, since delivering these spatial plans. Plan Change 33, has been a key element in terms of enabling growth within these areas, and there has been significant investment to date in Te Papa, obviously in the city centre, but more broadly Cameron Road. Stage 1, Stage 2 is underway, and so forth. I think important to note that we've been having ongoing partnership engagement with the likes of or with Accessible Properties Limited, still working towards precinct planning in the Te Papa area with them. Some things have changed though. The hospital discussion between around the hospital and Greta Marawaiwai, the race course, that's played out not differently, but it needed to play out, and at this point looks like the hospital will potentially redevelop on its existing site, and the race course will remain. So some things have changed, some things have remained constant. I think within the Mount and Otomaitai, as we noted earlier, less delivery in the last couple years there around comparative to Te Papa, where we're seeing the majority of investment and growth, but we continue to work closely, and I think particularly in the Mount area, the Mount Business Association businesses have given a very strong direction to some of the outcomes they're seeking to see, and we've been working with the Mount industrial businesses as well to see improvements within that area, and that is ongoing, including some of the work staff are doing both within the Equality Working Party and around landscape planning.
This would be good engagement though, if you put this up in each region and say, what do you think? I have a feeling my mountain in Arataki, people might suggest that very strong opposition to Plan Change 33, and we don't like the Pito development might be big parts of that. So it's interesting that you're choosing these ones to put up, and I'd like to think we do that. Are we actually achieving what we wanted to achieve at some stage?
Next slide, please. So you've seen this map before. It's the growth allocations for the next 10 years. I guess looking back, the bright red area in the middle, Te Papa has seen some of the highest growth particularly in terms of our intensification areas, in the last years, and going forward, our growth allocations, see substantial or the most growth allocation to that area. So at around 2,100 dwellings over the next 10 years, and then within the Otomaitai and the Mount areas, close to 1,000 dwellings each over the next 10 years. So you've got between 100 and 200 dwellings per year. So the discussion is both how we support the growth that has occurred and how we support and encourage that growth moving forward within these areas. Next slides. So the top 3 bullets really just reflecting back what we feel we've heard to date in some of our previous workshops and discussions with yourselves, that strong support for intensification. So just noting that there's a specific workshop scheduled for the 24th of September on that. Support for spatial plan outcomes, and what we're hearing is focusing on those areas where the potential is the highest. And in this case, from our perspective, that remains the Te Papa Peninsula. So the discussions...
So where you say support spatial plan outcomes, they're not, you're not saying we support those outcomes that you've had on the previous slide?
Our understanding is you support ongoing growth within
There
these
being
areas.
outcomes, absolutely.
Within these areas,
Yeah, but we haven't specifically said, okay.
Yeah, okay. So it is, at this point, the ongoing conversations you'll have with the transport team as part of their workshop, with the Spaces and Places team around investment, which will occur later today, and some of those other workshops. And, we are seeing ongoing opportunities to work with Accessible Properties Limited, potentially the hospital going forward, continuing to work with the university, the Mount Business Association and the Mount Industrial Businesses, so forth, while we have a separate discussion on the city centre, again, those opportunities to work with other developers who are keen to move forward. I think, those are the real opportunity areas to help them move forward with their aspirations. Next slide, please. Just two more. Look, I think what this slide is really looking to say is, if you don't invest, there are consequences. And as I said earlier, our evidence shows us, and through the business case work, through our discussions with developers, partners, and so forth, is that investment supports, but it does change a place and it does attract development over time. So it's important to continue. And when we see growth in these areas, obviously there's wider economic benefits for the city. So look, I think it's self-explanatory, in terms of those slides. If we're not investing, then potentially we do start seeing growth outpacing that support. There are opportunities, and I guess areas that the community has been talking to yourselves about, whether it's around investment at the Mount, and acknowledging the circumstances there. It is the discussions that we're having with the Equality Working Party, and around those areas, and continuing to work with those parties.
So can I just ask, the point of this slide, I don't want to find you say, no, we've shared this with you and you agreed with it, and you were happy with it. So the point of this slide is acknowledging where we haven't done so well and what the long-term plan might need to address? Question mark?
Sorry, I guess the point of the slide is that in making your decisions as to whether or not to invest, in these intensification areas, will have implications on how fast or how far growth is supported in those areas.
So you've titled it Implications of the Current Reduced Intensification Budget. Which budget have we reduced?
So certainly the Spaces and Places one is one that has been reduced within the spatial plan areas, and so Ross will discuss that further with you this afternoon in terms of the slides. And then it is an ongoing, and it's not that this council has reduced those budgets, it's that the budgets, I guess, that the fiscal constraints have become greater, that we have lost investment from partners such as Waka Kotahi in some of our transport areas and so forth. So what we have seen is a reduction in proposed investment in these areas, and a need for a discussion around that.
So these are from the emerging budgets that are being developed. This is the ones that are bubbling to the likely to be below the line, and we're just flagging it for you that's what that's looking like. You'll get a bit more of the detail to come in some of the other presenters. If there's things in here that you go, well, actually we really want to see, because we all know that the envelope is very tight. So there might be some things in here particularly you go, well, we really do want to focus on this one, so we really want this to come back for more thinking. And we are going to be providing a list of projects that don't get through into the draft budgets, but we are trying to say, well, some of the things are proceeding at the moment and some of them aren't, and here's how they relate to the AIPs. But not everything can be delivered. It's just the reality of what we're facing.
So we've had conversations to date that we do want to see Te Papa intensification, and we're not all sure that all the greenfields development we should be spending the money on that. So when do we have that conversation?
You'll get that when you get the, because it's predominantly capital investment, when you get the capital list. So as Andy said, you have given us some guidance for preparing the draft list that you want to proceed with those existing urban growth areas. So they'll, if they can be
Some of them.
Some of them, yep. So
That's what worried me. That
yep. So they'll be
might
really
be all of them.
transparent, and so we'll be showing you what is in there and what's not. So we're really just trying to use this as some early guidance of what goes in above the line, or what we're trying to fit in above the line, and what's more likely to be below the line. All of that will be available for you to see. We're just really trying to highlight this so you can go, and if there's some particular ones you want to watch out for, or as that capital program comes, you think, I want to focus on that particular area, rather than it perhaps being hidden, you were asking us to be clear about how the AIPs were flowing into the LTP, and it is still a draft, and this is discussion. Give us some steer, but also to inform you when you come to do the looking at that above and below the line, you know a little bit more about how it links to the strategic or the overall plan.
So one of the things on Te Papa delivery of intensification, we still wanted, I believe, more understanding of how we can influence high rise in Te Papa, and I don't know if we've got that, and so this puts two things in that I'm not sure is what the main thing is. We want to think, how do we influence intensification in Te Papa, and that's something it's put on the table a few times, but it's not on this slide.
Yep, correct. So the intensification discussion will come back on the 24th September and will include, some of the, potential levers that you can be considering to further enable that intensification within that context.
And a comparison with the cost of those levers versus developing Upper Belk Road.
Yep, we can have that discussion as part of that. Yep. So this and I guess these slides are. It is part of that conversation around how to support intensification. This is kind of, I guess, probably at a more general level, looking at growth within each of these areas and saying how do we support what's occurred and what's going forward, and that is part of the equation. And then the intensification one is more around the direct levers that to look at for enabling a development itself. Look, I mean, the last slide I've got here really was just indicating, or is just indicating, that you will be having these discussions with the Spaces and Places team, the transport teams coming up, and this is very much about putting those conversations into that context. And as per the previous stock take, we are proposing that through 2027, and once we get through this LTP process, there'll be some further discussion around, I guess, better reflecting outcomes from the LTP within a revised action plan for each of these spatial plans, and that will give you further opportunity to be looking to the future. I'll pause there.
Glenn.
My view is I think there's a lot of good work in there. I think it's definitely too early to go back to the community on Utamotai, but I do think there's a potential problem that we're not addressing, which is that we're trying to control where growth goes, but the market determines the growth. And so what's happening in Utamotai at the moment is a good example where it hasn't got the infrastructure investment that has happened in the Mount and is happening in Te Papa. And bearing in mind that Te Papa is actually Mara Waiwai or Greaton as well. So it's a big, long area, and it's got, it will have 2 aquatic facilities. It's had 2. It's had a number of, Pemberton Park, all sorts of facilities, the domain. So there's a whole lot of sunk investment from years ago. There's a whole lot of new investment, $1 billion worth on the books, over half of it invested. Haven't done a count, probably 2/3 or something, and and you compare that with somewhere like Otamotai, and if you add in Bethlehem, you have just as much growth in those two areas as in the wider so-called Te Papa. And I keep thinking of Irene Walker saying, don't call Mara Waiwai Te Papa, but that's another matter. I kind of think we run the risk of the market just delivering these intensified developments in places like Otamotai, and we haven't put in the infrastructure. And that's sort of subtle at first, and then it gets a bit more obvious, which is we're probably at that point now, and it's going to hit a threshold where it becomes very obvious. And I think we need to get ahead of that, and I think we're not investing in the right areas to cater for market growth. And I don't know how we can address that other than to go back to the basics and say when we, and it's on us, invest in the LTP, we have to make a conscious choice about whether we're happy to see levels of service degrade. Bearing in mind the Commissioner's view was, no, they signed off the Otamotai spatial plan saying the priority should be for existing residents retaining and increasing levels of service, not obsession with growth. I use the word obsession. They said focus on growth or some word like that.
So have you got an action in there, Glenn?
My action would just be for everybody to think about that around the table, because it's on us, and we're not doing that.
Think about what?
Where we spend our money. We're planning to spend 90 million more into an aquatic centre in a part of town that has one, which is Te Papa. We're planning to spend a bunch of money on a community stadium somewhere, but meanwhile there are people craving out for more facilities out in Otamotai, Bethlehem, and we've got nothing even in the plan at the moment of any significance for that. So that's a good example. Same with transport, same with public transport, same with, I could just list a whole lot of things if you want, but there's just so much.
But that to me is going back to, we don't talk about the whole of Tauranga in one conversation, we just have independent conversations.
Yep.
Yep. Thank you. So I guess I'm going to ask if our giant planning jigsaw, the investment side of where we're putting the money over time would be a interesting thing for us even to have that as an exercise to do. Anyway, that's something we can do. Okay, moving on because we're going slow. So this is Anna.
Yes.
Kia ora, Jeremy and Anna. Welcome. Your
Good
time
afternoon.
starts now.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Anna Engstedt. I'm the team lead of Climate and Resilience, and I'm here to seek your feedback on the proposed Climate Action and Investment Plan, the draft funding package we put in, and the priorities in the plan. Next slide, please. So I came to talk to you back in May to the City Future Committee, where you endorsed the strategic direction for climate and resilience in the long-term plan. So based on that feedback, we reviewed the climate AIP and put forward the focus and where the funding should go into the draft LTP. So today is really to sense check that with you to get your feedback on these priorities and the funding, and if you think that we got the balance right, are we investing in the right things, is the level of investment right, and if you wish any changes, where should we make those? And before we go into that, I just want to highlight what Christine mentioned as well, that this only really looks at the climate activity. Things like cycleways or planting and other activities, they are part of separate programs. However, the climate AP sets the direction for all of Tauranga in terms of climate resilience and decarbonization. So they do all contribute and they do all fit into the plan. However, what we're looking at today in terms of funding is just the climate-specific activities, but then it's up to all of us really to support other activities as well to align with the outcomes in the plan. So a key driver really for the updated funding package and priorities is the new requirements on councils to develop adaptation plans for high-risk areas. So that has come through the Climate Change Response Amendment Bill and the Planning Bill through the RM reform. So that sets out requirements on councils to basically manage climate-related natural hazard risks, to work with communities to develop the actions, the funding, and the decisions that will need to be made over at least 30 years. So the timing is still subject to be confirmed based on the when the regional spatial plans will be notified and implemented, but the initial timing is basically to deliver these plans, the first round of plans by financial year 2033. So there is quite a work program building up to that. Adaptation planning can be, or is a time resource consuming activity, involves a lot of engagement, shared ownership of risk and actions in the community, and also some decisions, potential tough decisions around where and how we invest in terms of infrastructure and supporting communities.
So Anna, that concerns me a little bit, but we're not talking about delivering anything till 2033. What was happening 7 years ago that we're delivering now? Is there anything, or did we just start doing adaptation planning now and we're not delivering till 33? I just feel there's a bit of a gap the next 7 years on this.
So looking in the past, over the past 2 decades, we worked on understanding climate risks. So that sets us up in a really good position. A lot of councils haven't done much of this. So the first step really now is to identify priority areas for adaptation planning. So that's done through the regional spatial plan process, and that's something that you all will be having a say on, of course, and also the regional decision makers. So that's we're working towards the requirements under the Climate Change Response Act, and there it covers quite specific scope in terms of identifying these areas and developing specific adaptation plans for them that will need to be reported to the minister. So a lot of the work we've done in the past will help us set us up, but there is still some work we need to do to get in a place where these plans can be adopted and implemented.
Just for context, so this is a bill that's come in this year, so that's why we're doing it now. Yeah.
Yeah. So the amendment bill was announced just a month or so ago, and it's making its way through Parliament. So the exact timing is not defined yet, but it will be likely in the next year.
I think that's just context, that this is not something now we'll start doing it, it's just we're doing it because the bill's coming in.
So it's a brand new AIP?
Yeah.
No, so this IIP was adopted in 2023 for the last long-term plan. So that's when basically we got some initial funding to deliver the climate actions.
So it's not new.
So so based on when we spoke in May, the City Future Committee, we presented the initial review we done of the climate AIP. We got the strategic direction endorsed, and basically what we now worked through and what that means for us and this upcoming LTP. is that we, in the draft funding, we put in more focus on developing reliable and complete data to help us understand risks. As we just spoke about, work on developing adaptation plans as required, to develop the right tools to inform governance decision making, more community awareness and engagement in this area, and also some youth-led climate action thanks to our Bloomberg Philanthropies grant. So we proposed less funding around community grants, community-led projects such as contestable funds for communities to do projects in the neighborhoods, community gardens, or mode shift initiatives, workshops, and similar. There would be less progress in actions related to behavior change in the community, and wider citywide emission reduction initiatives. So that could be, just supporting things like EV charging or investigating options where we can have stronger levers for decarbonization. And also when it comes to our own delivery and infrastructure, we'll have less progress in terms of trialing different materials, say if it's low carbon asphalt or other technologies or design. So that's what we put into the draft LTP. So basically what this means...
There's a question, Anna, please.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, just can you go back to the previous slide? You talk about more youth-led climate action, but less community supports and services, so how do you trade one off against the other, and what about the oldies?
No, it's a good question, and yeah, of course, happy to. I'm here to get your feedback, really. So we've had a couple different contestable funds for community groups and not-for-profits. We had a paper going up through for the annual plan where you decided to halve the budget for those funds. So that's of course impacted. We kept that as the status quo going into this LTP. However, that is an area where, of course, there's a lot we could do in terms of supporting community-led action. We suggested here to focus more on building engagement to build an understanding of risk and ownership, and potentially some practical guidance for homeowners to build resilience. The Youth-led Climate Action is purely because we were successful in securing the international grant, so it's an easy project to drive in that way in terms of giving return. Yes, yeah, and we'll get into that.
So I'm still going to stay on this too. So I'm just looking at the climate AIP, Climate Action and Investment Plan on the website, which is 51 pages long. Where do I see those as the priorities in this document that I can say, yes, those we're changing from here to here? Where do we put those in the document?
So what happens with the AIPs last time round was the AIP is a long list of actions, and then the items which were considered priority and the ones which were funded by the previous council, we annotated those within the document. We'll do the same thing this time round and say that this is the new council's priorities, and if they're the same as what's up there, that's fine. If they're different, then let us know what those priorities are, and we'll make it clear in the document which actions we are pursuing, and those are the actions which will then come back and report back to you on over the next 3-year period.
And I guess I'm 51 pages of a document that we're going to do another document for the next LTP, and we have this one is, I'm just having a look at the AIP on the website.
It won't be a different document. This one will just be annotated and updated. There's a refresh of the climate plan.
Yeah, but I just, this is part of being efficient. We've got 5 bullet points here that you've heard from us is the right thing to do, and we'll update the AIP accordingly, but there's a lot of the rest of the stuff that we're not putting up, and sure, we might have had a session on it, but we mightn't have all been saying, okay, what needs, so we need some, well, I need some help to say, this is what we're focusing on, and some of the details not as important, but it's going from that slide to say we're doing less of that, and you're going to say people said that was fine, but then I look at a 51-page report and I go, well, what else did we say was okay? So it's not I guess this is a Christine thing probably to say, you know, is this a good process that we have these really long-winded documents, you seek our direction, and we want to give it, and we want to make this work. We know we've had a very long council report to say this is are we meeting the needs of the AIP, meeting the benchmarks, and I think we said we'll have it once a year, not once every 6 months, because it was a really huge report. And these are the things that I guess we're saying, is this the most efficient way of meeting the needs of our community?
Yeah, the challenge is that they are large documents with a lot of information in them. The Commission made the decision to go through each and every one, and then they brought to staff and said, these are the ones that we want in and these are the ones that we don't. We've sort of got a direction from you that that's not something you want to do, but if you wanted to do that, so what we've tried to do is to take from what we've understood from your informal direction of the areas where you think this focus, and also from our staff's understanding of where we think the best bang for buck is and where you'd put more investment and where you'd put less investment. So that's what we're coming through with you. We could do something similar to what we've done with some of the previous work we've done on prioritisation and CapEx and give you sheets, but we don't sometimes get a very large response. It's probably not something that's effective to do through these types of workshops. I
just wonder if we're not saying, is this the most effective way of achieving what we wanted to achieve? And I'm struggling. Rod.
So just so I've got this right, so Jen's talking about this massive document on the website. So I presume we've identified these are the things we're going to tweak. We're going to consult on those in the long-term plan, and then there would be some adjustment to that big long document, I presume? Yes. That would be the process?
This would go into the draft budget that will come to you, and then you'll look at it and balance it with everything else, because this is just one bit of and the problem is it's a big beast and we're just able to plug one, and then you step back and look at the whole. If you then go, these, as Jeremy said, these are the things you do want to proceed and these are the ones that you don't, or that you support, but this is not enough funding in the bucket to proceed with it this time, we'll update the documents, and so that a member of the community can open it up and see. Through the stock take, you've confirmed that in the work that's been done that they're still all valid action and investment plans. We'll end up with valid action investment plans with actions that still make sense, but only these ones, we'll identify them, are the ones that are able to be funded, given current constraints, and these actions will be moved forward and then they'll be monitored, and the others will still sit there for a future council to relook at. So yes, that's the intention.
But my point really is around that you do get to a point where you do update those big...
Absolutely. We update the schedules so everyone, and so you can see what's funded and what's unfunded. Absolutely. Yep.
And through the chair, just be a little careful on the, we'll put it in the draft and we'll consult on it. The direction through previous experiences with this council, we wanted us to narrow down the consultation topics. The chances of consulting in depth on one element of $2 million worth of a $400 million operating budget are slight. I mean, if you give us that direction, it's exactly what we'll do, but there'll be a bunch of other things that you'll want to consult on through the LTP process as well. These may or may not make that line.
So what you're talking about there would be the last sort of step we take is these are the ones we really need to chat about. These ones, push them through. Yeah.
Next slide, please. So what this means in financial OPEX terms is that we're able to continue to tighten the budget while preparing for future adaptation planning requirements. And here the largest area of investment will remain in risk information and data while we're growing our community awareness and engagement over the first 3 years of the LTP. And what you see here is all the resources to deliver the program. our preference is to build internal capabilities, but there's also options to rely on external expertise over time. And also note that this doesn't include CapEx, that would be considered separately.
And this doesn't include headcount, or does? Internal costs?
Yeah. So in the first 3 years of the LTP, we included all the resources required to deliver it. It might again, the assumption is to be able to build internal capabilities. With external, it might incur extra costs, especially in the long term.
Yes, those costs include all staff costs and all operational costs.
Great, thank you.
Next slide,
We're not
please.
spending a whole lot on climate and resilience, are we? In the scheme of 608 million of OPEX every year.
Yeah, so there's options where, next slide, where we could do less. So we talked a little bit about the community funds, where we could reduce those. We could reduce communication activities, and also slow or start our adaptation planning later in time for legislative requirements, but not upfront. And obviously those options provide savings, but they also come with consequences. In terms of if elected members wish to accelerate progress, there are some areas where we could do more. So we could start adaptation planning sooner in time, so that would cover both infrastructure, communities, and make some key decisions earlier to support the adaptation plans. We could look at community resilience funding, so that could be some type of funds where homeowners or community members could apply to support, say, property level interventions to reduce risks. Or other services where we give more hands-on support. We could also increase our investment in energy resilience, so that could be things like larger scale solar projects that will save us cost in the long term, or batteries to support resilience related to our facilities.
If later on, when you're looking at these in retrospect, the colours on the top of the line reflect back into the graph on the slide 2-3 slides ago. So that's split. The black one just indicates it's CapEx, so it's not part of that 2 million a year.
So I think we can just jump to the last slide. That's just the key questions, really, for you to consider. Thank you.
Just a question, so the requirement under when the new planning acts come in for adaptation, that's having to fit into your current budget?
Yes, that's planned.
So you're cutting costs even though you're adding a whole new area of adaptation planning, implementation, delivery over time?
Yes.
That's why it still dips down into 28, but it
Yeah.
starts to climb back out again after that.
I think we'll have one less metre of road and you'll be fine. Sorry. Hemi.
Thank you. Just playing this through Māori, I understood there's been quite a bit of mana whenua engagement. Marae are very susceptible to climate impacts. So playing that through, if you go back to your previous slide, if we're wanting to support them, would that be in that left-hand side, earlier communications with our communities? Was that where you would see that happening? With the likes of the whareroas and those that are obviously fairly vulnerable at the moment?
Yeah, so there's different avenues. For the the priority areas that will require adaptation plans. That's identified through the regional spatial plan, so that will need to go through quite a rigorous process. And based on the criteria, it could be that some areas get prioritized and others not. However, if we wanted to put in place some type of funding or support to communities that could be provided separately, we also have the option to help develop voluntary adaptation plans to work with these communities that are in high-risk areas or vulnerable.
So as far as that budgeting goes, it's probably the orange one in the middle, that sort of discrete funding. And as far as the wider jigsaw goes, there is another paper coming to you specifically on Council's appetite for supporting Marae-based interventions, not just related to climate.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Glenn's got a question. Hear me?
Where we're at with the data side of it. So I see the significant reduction in natural hazard climate data guidance and tools, but there's also the issue of whether we're still operating at a bay-wide level, and that's always more cost-effective to get those assessments done for greenhouse gas emissions, for instance. Is that happening in other ways? Is that a significant drop that's going to really impact that natural hazards area?
Yes, so we've done significant work to get pretty good hazards data. However, there is some areas where we can still improve to form better decisions. So that's what we're going to focus on to complete that data set. And yes, there are some efficiencies working across with other councils. We also see that the government is looking at providing some data. So yeah, we're constantly monitoring what's happening and what we need. In some cases, it is quite local, the type of investigations that will need to be done to get more local data. Sometimes what comes out at a national level or regional level is not fit for purpose for the planning we're doing. So yeah, we are considering both.
Great, thank you, Anna and Jeremy, well presented.
So in the absence of any other direction, we'll just stick with what we're planning at the moment, but those questions on that last slide remain live for direction from councillors at any stage.
And we've got these slides.
Okay, I guess I'm concerned about as I have been all my term on council, so it won't come as a surprise, around the funding for natural hazards area and how it's especially the overlap with waters now that we're moving out of council control for stormwater, and how everything sort of fits together. So I see that as I'm not telling you what you should do so much as just I'm highlighting that as a risk. And I don't think it's good to reduce spending in that area unless we're really confident that other things are going to allow us to increase the outcomes from that area. And so if there are other things there, that's fine. But if not, I would think we need to spend more in that area. And that's putting aside, what happened at Moa, which is obviously highlights that sort of area. But just in terms of generally around the city, it's something we've known for a while that we need to spend more on. And so to pull back on that worries me. And also, I guess it does seem a bit like transport to be very focused on a sort of central government driven agenda. And I think it's better that we figure out what our communities need, and to actually look at citywide emissions reduction sounds very sort of 2020 probably, but it is something which is, as we know, it's going to have to happen at some point, or else there'll be significant consequences. So to me, that should be part of what we're looking at, and look at what the options are a layer below this. So not the detailed line by line, but just what would it mean to actually spend a bit more on emissions, citywide initiatives, because again, it's not just in this budget, it's in other capital program budgets, and the obvious one for me that I keep harping on about, is public transport. That if we just had a session on growth plans, spatial plans, public transport's critical there. We've just got this session, it's critical here. Go to the transport, congestion issues, it's critical there, and yet we're not spending money on it. So to me, there's just huge red flags around some of this, and I'm not pointing the finger at the AIP, I'm pointing the finger at our investment levels across council.
And I think I'll come back to you, Rod. I agree. We need to be. We talk about being a city people want to live in, and that means we have to look after our the climate and the environment. And this is a pretty low budget. I certainly wouldn't want to be reducing any investment. I guess I struggle a little bit because we haven't said with this budget these are the outcomes you will get, and that's what I probably would. That's sort of for my 10-year plan, that's what I'd like to be able to say, well, what do we get for this amount of investment? But I'm not feeling that we need to reduce investment when it's 2.5 million. Rod, then Hautapu.
Just not sure whether we've given any consideration to what's happening next door. Like they are largely environmental. I'm talking about the regional council. The fact that that's been disbanded, what happens to their budget? Does that then, if we become a unitary council, do we get that money to add to our pool and to direct where that ends up, to Glenn's point?
So the whole LTP preparation process is based on status quo because we don't know any different. All those conversations will have to come through whatever redesign process may or may not happen over the next 12 or 18 months or the next 4 or 5 years, depending on which bucket we end up with, depending on government decisions.
Sorry, I'll couch my question in the present then. What do they do in this sphere that complements what we do? If you add the two parts together, have we got the full answer that Glenn's asking for?
I don't know the very details, but from what I understand is that they also struggle with funding to empower more public transport. So yeah, don't know exactly what we can do here, but it is a challenge across both buildings.
Rick, did you get it?
Yes, I certainly wouldn't want to reduce the overall quantum. Perhaps
I would write all these down, Anna. He ticked, she ticked.
Reprioritisation within the existing budget, maybe, but it would depend on what that looks like. If we want to limit expenditure in terms of where we're heading. So yeah, I'm definitely not in the space of reducing that quantum. I think the community expects us to maintain that focus on this area.
Hey, Tabu.
No, not in workshop. Tēnā kōrua, thank you for the presentation. Considering the small pool of funding to do quite a significant piece of work, and we can only deal with what's in front of you, so we're not looking yet beyond Tauranga City Council, do you think we're investing, I guess, are you confident in, what am I trying to say? Are we doing enough enabling work to create a resilient city with this money that we've got?
You're allowed to say no. We're not.
I guess that's a wider conversation because this conversation is about Anna's team of central influencers as opposed to, if you're talking about genuine resilience, you're talking about a lot of CapEx. And that's not our world. So
education and data collection.
Yeah, so and that's exactly our role, is to provide the tools to have those conversations. Yeah. It's probably a good conversation to have with the asset owners and the big spenders and the CapEx as well. And you won't get a straight answer there either because you can never do everything. You can never gold plate absolutely every asset, but it's a tension.
Is there anything we can do at this table to relieve that tension so cross-council collaboration is easier to achieve?
It's not about the cross-council collaboration, it's about limited resources and how you spend your limited resources. I mean, you've got a CapEx cap, and there's an amount of that which can go into making existing assets resilient, there's an amount which can go into making new assets resilient, and there's an amount which can go into just new assets full stop. It's where that balance is.
Yeah. Sorry, then last question. So I can't exactly remember the strategies that go this way and the things that weave that way, but is resilience one of those cross-cutting themes? It is, okay.
Great, thank you very much. That was definitely we don't want to reduce funding. Welcome.
So we're speaking to 4 of the action investment plans. Actually, 2 are action investment plans, 2 are plans that we joint deliver on with other stakeholders, mostly central government agencies. Alana is with me. She's the team leader for community development. She hasn't presented to council before, so be kind to her, please. So what we'll run through is just in terms of the overview of what ComDev does, and the 2 action investment plans. The starting point, there was significant financial reduction over the last few years, so where we started off and where we are now is quite substantially different, and that obviously has constrained some of the delivery, so seeking direction from you in terms of what that might look like moving forward. So essentially the ComDev team facilitates social capital and critical social investment, and with a wider community benefit for council. Examples of this being relationships with community centres, support funding outcomes, and support diverse events, enabling community voices to be represented in our strategic priorities through trusted engagement. So many of the things, just listening to Anna now in terms of where the things they said they could do less of, there is some opportunity that ComDev provides, because we establish and maintain special interest groups in different areas, so whether it's accessibility, whether it's youth, whether it's safety, etc. Those are good places that if we are reducing some of the things, we can pick that up in our space and at least support. I'll hand to Alana to run through the first 3, and then I'll speak to the homelessness one.
Welcome.
Morena. Oh, kia ora. So it's afternoon now. Yeah, as Paula said, the team, we're kind of a little bit twofold. We internally focus, so we support through strategic advice and operational expertise to internal teams, bringing that community voice into council and into projects where we can, facilitating that collaboration and building that capacity and advocating for change and kind of different ways of doing things and connecting people, organisations and communities. And so the first AIP, click through. So accessible tauranga. So this action investment plan, we've refocused 3 key actions and kind of reprioritised around our accessible TIC accreditation, universal design, which Tan and Paula presented on last Tuesday, and then refocusing and enhancing the work that we already are doing with Hapu to improve accessibility for our marae. OPEX towards the universal toolkit will ensure that that's embedded in council projects. And the audits and basic maintenance and recommendations for our marae accessibility will be enhanced through improved investment in that space. This action and investment plan was heavily engaged with our disabled and older communities. So we kind of think this is a vital piece of action investment for council. So keen for any questions on that one. Yep.
Do you want?
Accessible TIC, can you just give us a little brief? Do we have it? Are we going for it? Are we close? Are we far away? What does it mean?
We are kind of at the beginning stages, so there's 9 priority areas in that space, and we are either leading or progressing towards on most of those. So yes, almost there.
Chair, through you, if I may. May I respond?
Yeah, of course.
Just on that, that was one of the things when Tan presented last week in terms of that broader social outcomes that we are asking of our providers or suppliers. And that's typically something that is on there. It's something we really need to consider internally if we're asking that of our suppliers, I think. So our team is very, very supportive of that progressing.
And it complements the Universal Design Toolkit as well.
Sorry, so the accessible tick is connected to the toolkit, is it?
It's separate but complementary. So it's more internally focused for TCC to have our house in order to support the universal design, planning and design and delivery.
Okay, so it's like
so it's more of an education piece.
So internal scorecard sort of thing?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I guess just my only comment is, you know, that third one, you know, improved accessibility of Marae, that's fine, but have we got all our facilities and community centres done before we do that? And that's just from you know, our job as council, and if we've got money left over, that's a great initiative, but yeah, I think we should be prioritising council facilities first.
I can respond to that. Thank you, Mayor. With regards to the accessibility, we have done a lot of the BVL properties, and Taina is our lived experience advisor, and she is very well used internally, particularly by Spaces and Places for new projects and builds. She has also been involved in doing the accessibility audits on the marae as well, but I think I heard somebody prior to me saying that there is a separate paper coming up with regards to that as a standalone piece of work to consider being funded, which we'll also be feeding into. But yes, we do advise, and I think sometimes the challenge is we're advised, we don't have influence to enforce. So, yeah, firstly, if we're invited to the table, secondly, dependent on whether that advice is taken on board.
Tēnā kōrua. So on point 2, embedding the Universal Design Toolkit, is there resistance there why that's needing embedment and it's not just a happening BAU thing?
There's not necessarily resistance, so this was only approved by the elected members last week.
Okay.
Maybe you weren't, I don't think you were here. So we're still at the early stages, and again, I suppose what we're seeking is, because it's not a policy or mandatory, we're really relying on uptake by teams that we would hope would be using it. So there will be a piece of education and a piece of work and probably an extent of training that we will be making available to the wider organisation. There was conversations in terms of talking with the likes of CPAD that we actually have this in a checklist for projects and not an opt-out, but rather this is your starting point, and if you're not able to do it, you need to evidence a good reason why, that you have considered it, and there's a good reason why you're not following it. So we're right at obviously not even at day 1 yet of rolling all that out. Yeah.
Next one.
So we are also responsible for the delivery of the Safe Communities Action and Investment Plan, so community safety space. In particular, this AIP funding was significantly reduced and staffing capacity decreased over the last year, which is already impacting the level of service and the ability to deliver priority actions in the community safety space. In saying that, we have been ensuring that that level of service doesn't reduce, even though with reduced capacity. And also re-looking at the actions and seeing where community lead can support more in some of those actions, and refocused across 5 priority recommendations in that space.
Alana, can you just bring your microphone just slightly towards you,
Sorry.
please?
Yeah, and so I guess we've had quite a successful kaitiaki safety ambassador approach with Helen and Paul in that space, supporting our business and main streets. So looking for direction on whether that approach and level of investment and involvement in community safety could be increased through the action investment plan.
If I can just add on to that, I think just going back to Paul and Helen, their role primarily was the initial intent was that they would be business liaisons, insofar as the unhappy businesses with the whether it's the perceived lack of safety as well as the challenges by the homeless community. And we are really trying to keep them in their lane of business liaison just for safety reasons, with things that are escalating in the city. So if we were to invest in that, it would need to be a model that's thought of. It's not extending what they're doing, because that wasn't the initial intent. This action investment plan, when it was first put together, had a budget of 650,000 attached to it.
And then our next, it's not quite an action investment plan, but it's Welcoming Communities Plan, which is a multi-agency and community development plan. Council first started working towards its accreditation, which is through Ministry of Business and Environment in 2018. And then we've also advanced through to an advanced accreditation as a welcoming community in December 2024. A lot of work in that space. I mean, Tauranga has become quite a diverse and culturally identified city. So having designated or dedicated resource to support the operational delivery of the plan to balance staff capacity and community expectations would be welcomed. We're doing a lot in this space around growing that mana whenua partnerships, community partnerships, and I guess it'd be quite a huge reputational risk as TCC is responsible for implementing a lot of that plan. It was sub-regional, so we were joint with Western Bay District Council, and then since the re-accreditation in 2024, we've split out the plans. So the steering group still meets sub-regionally, but Tauranga City and Western Bay have separate plans in that space. So, yeah, just would you support more investment into the Welcoming Communities program moving forward?
Just to follow up on that, in terms of when we did split, it was somewhat funding related, but also we had TechTed funded a position to support our advisor in this space, but it was once-off funding, so once that funding ended, we lost that advisor. So we have Heidi that does this piece of work for her, but currently she's half her time is also seconded to Ngāti Rangi to help them get their ethnic connection with partners established, and they've had some really good successes with her being there. Ngāti Rangi are also they're the ones that do the porphyries for us for the citizenship ceremonies that come through. They have their a separate welcome. Right, the last one is.
Sorry, we've got a question.
Oh, sorry. So the last one is the Kāinga Tapu homelessness strategy. So we're one of 14 stakeholders to this. We currently have a 0.5. We lost our full-time advisor in this space through Reset. We have a 0.5, which is Helen, that helps out with some of the delivery of the actions that come off the task force table. I suppose seeking direction on this, Councillor Taylor, it was great to have you at our last meeting in terms of just seeing the extent of partnership and the extent of work being done. There is no budget attached to this currently. TCC has had four actions to deliver on, which we either have delivered or we've closed off. And I have been the chair for this probably the last 2 or 3 years. So seeking thoughts around our continued, I suppose, investment in this space and participation.
Rod, then Hemi.
Yep. First of all, I think you guys do a great job. I think you've had resource taken away over the last couple of years, and the problem certainly hasn't got any lesser. I think it's probably worse than ever at the moment. I do think there's a central government cop-out on this that we're bearing the brunt of. I don't quite know how the Mayor's got a thing in next month that hopefully we'll be able to tell them exactly what we think. I can't speak highly enough of Helen and Paul. I think they do a great job around the city. It's not just in the CBD. They get out to Greaton. I think they've been involved at the Mount from time to time. So, those resources have been vital, and I think we've paid for them. I don't know whether we should be paying for them as a council or the ratepayers should be. I think it's a lot of these things are health related. A bit of a cop-out, but I certainly wouldn't be looking to cut any of this funding. I think it's crucial to our community, and I'd probably be reasonably supportive to push the boat out a little bit and just try and make sure we can keep these people in place that we at least have now, and then maybe there's some stuff we need to look at around facilities. We've got Under the Stars up at Cliff Road, which is basically on the chopping block. We need to look at relocating that either to a council building or whatever, but definitely central government has to, they're going to talk about rate caps and that sort of stuff. They need to stand up and do their bit for this part of our community, I think.
Probably just a comment, and just listening to all these today, and this is not a criticism of this exact AIP, but there seems to be there's no coordination. For example, grants to the community. We've heard Climate Action are giving grants to the community, and there's grants to the community here, and there's grants to the community there. I think any grant that goes out needs to be in a central location. It shouldn't be out of these AIPs, and then we can decide what percentage should go to each part. But this seems to be we could have 5 AIPs giving money to the same organisation, without actually knowing if we're talking about silos. And I think what we don't get is we don't get that actual view as to what actually goes out to these community organisations. So I think, there's just an overall comment around just what I've heard today and the various different groups is how we control the flow of funds outside the organisation to other organisations. If it's an internal piece of work, that's a different thing. But when money goes to other groups, there is a coordination, and we actually have a look over where it's going. Not really probably a question for you. It's just
Could I respond, please, Chair?
Yes, you may. I've also put that as an action, Mahe.
So community grants sits as one of my teams as well, and we have established probably in the last 2 years a community hub for that very reason, that we have a single place that any of our grants go out through, so that there's consistency of what an agreement looks like. There is an agreement, that there is consistency of accountability, that there are prompts that are automated for relationship holders to have those quarterly meetings, so that we don't get to the end of the year and find that there's no deliverables. We could have caught that earlier on. The accountability reports then give us really rich data, which can then feed into the outcomes engine to give us some really good reporting as well. We have brought a lot of the funding across to us, just the administrative part. So we do have, the environmental stuff does sit through us. We also convene the panels and do a lot of the scoring pre-assessment. But there are some that sit outside, and I suppose the challenge is, again, we've got this, and the intent was a centre of excellence for all things that we can account for. But again, it depends on the fund holder as to whether they're wanting to allow us to administer that for them.
Okay. No, that's good to hear. So the AIP might be funding it, but it is going through that central portal.
Where the budget holder is willing to give us that to administer. Yeah.
No, thank you. No, that's exactly what I think we need. So thanks.
Just a question. What's the total in this current year of the rate requirement would go into this space, into the community development space. Do you know that number?
Yeah, it's roughly around 6 million for the ComDev team.
Yeah. And considering, you know, the constraints coming up and, you know, the areas where potentially we would look at cutting, I'm probably in the space like the previous one, you know, putting it out to the community, and it will go through a consultation process, but this is one that I think people would probably prefer to focus on other areas if we look at budget constraints. So I'm reasonably happy at this stage to at least keep the current funding and potentially a bit of reprioritisation of that quantum into areas of more need, if we can call it that. So I think, yeah, maybe there's a bit of discussion that this council needs to have when it comes time to, shuffle the deck and see where it goes if we retain the current budget.
Hear me?
Yeah, I think your slide back was about welcoming communities and would we want to invest more? Is that one? Is that right? Yeah. One back? Yeah. And I guess when you're looking at safer communities, homeless, this is just my view on welcoming communities. I know it's important to welcome communities, but I see it as lower on the priority. Close to nice to have, you know, important, and you know I know that iwi see this as important around doing the right thing to make sure people feel welcome. But I think, just given my view, I think first and foremost we want people to feel safe. I'm not, you know, and I know sometime in the we're going to have to make some tough calls. I'm just giving sort of some of my guidance that we're going to spend more money in welcoming communities at the expense of something else. But you know, that's just probably not that keen to support more investment. But that's just my view. We've got to keep people safe. And yeah, that the one that Rod talked around homeless, it's sort of not us, but someone's got to do it, and it's on our doorstep. And if we're going to see homeless all the time, there's a discretion to say, yes, we're not going to have X amount of welcoming new people to the city. That's just a view, Chair. I'm not really, you know, asking for any answer. I'm just, you know, I think you'll come here to get a little bit of an appetite of where people are thinking.
Glenn?
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And the one I particularly thought was good on the safer communities was more formalised approach to TCC working with Māori wardens, neighbourhood support, community patrol, etc. I think that's a really good initiative.
Is that the direction you have needed? Fabulous. Thank you very much for your presentation. And I think take, as Rod said, we do really appreciate the work that you do with the community and know the importance of it. So thank you, both of you, Paula and Elena. At the chair's discretion, and I'm chairing, but yes, I agree with you, Glenn. I haven't had lunch either. We're just going to have a 7-minute break.
took a stock take of that strategy, went back out to our key stakeholders, a few of yourselves, reported back on all of the actions that sat in there, and fundamentally we're doing pretty well. There's some things that we've knocked out of the park, there's some things that are lagging a little bit behind, but overwhelmingly we're heading in the right direction. We updated the strategy, signed that off, that's in play, and overall, like I said, we're tracking pretty well. What falls out of the strategy is the Historic Village Master Plan. So there's a bunch of projects that essentially are fed from the strategy, and if we keep delivering those projects, we keep delivering on the community's expectations in regards to that strategy. You can go to the next slide. We've developed a couple of priority areas for the next 3 years, which is access, safety and risk, and the second one being identity, activation and value. And really in terms of today, we're keen to get a guide from you in terms of how fast you want us to do that, because we could go fast and invest heavily, we could go really slow and not spend much. They both come with risks. One costs a lot, one doesn't. And I guess what we've done for the long-term plan is pitch it somewhere in the middle. We've said we just need to keep going. We've got a bunch of renewals that we need to do to stay on top of the maintenance of the assets that we've already got. We've got a list of 20-odd capital projects over the next 10 years that we want to get done. We're just, as of right now, about to go out to our key stakeholders at the Historic Village and send them the list of 20 projects and ask their opinion on what they think the priorities are. So again, we've got that stakeholder feedback to feed into the decision making. But ultimately, yeah, in terms of planning for the long-term plan and the numbers that end up in there, we're just keen to get a guide from you guys in terms of how hard and fast you want us to keep moving forward. Our preference is slow and steady. It means we're deliberate. It means we're really deliberately delivering on what's in the master plan and what's in the strategy, and a moderate level of investment. We don't want to overinvest, but we want to keep maintaining and improving the asset we've got, because that'll drive visitation and keep returning great outcomes to the community. So in terms of the slide that's up on the screen, we've pitched the LTP currently in the middle. And yeah, just after some feedback on that, I think the next page has got the list of projects. Yeah. So over a 10-year period, as it currently stands, renewals is a total budget of $4 million, and new capital over that 10-year period is just under 10, of which 2 million of renewals are proposed for the first 3 years and 6.5 of new capital for the first 3 years. The projects with an asterisk beside them are envisaged to be delivered over multiple years. That's the priority order that we've got the projects in the moment. So the first bunch on the left and right up the top before the line is year 1, the middle bunch is year 2, and the bottom couple is year 3. Subject to change based on your feedback, and subject to change based on the feedback that we'll get from the stakeholders with the digital survey that we're about to do. Happy to take any questions.
First question, does a bus get there?
Does a bus?
So it goes down and then up?
Across the road,
Clark Street.
Right. Okay, great. And does that bus get well used for people getting there? Is that considered a way of a normal way of getting there or not? Just looking at your car parking, and I know that's an issue, but
yeah, I think the bus is pretty well used by both us and the hospital across the road
course,
as well.
yeah,
So
right.
there's 2 bus stops, bus 59 bus I think it is.
Right.
It's really reasonably well used, yep.
and that would be one of the things that I would suggest we make sure we talk about, getting the bus to Historic Village. Glenn?
On that, I think that's one of the issues for public transport investment. There was going to be a bus hub there, or in that area, and there's not now. So it isn't a major, it's not a primary route. So it doesn't have the service level that the main routes do up Cameron Road. So I think it deters people with any kind of accessibility issues or anything from traversing that hill or trying to fit around that schedule, which isn't as good.
But if you're intending, if we've got Historic Village as a destination, which I think I saw on your first slide, then you work out when the bus goes that you can get there. And that's what I was making sure that happens, which is great. Rick?
Thank you. In terms of the total capex there, a lot of it, the big chunk seems to be in years 1 to 3. Is there potential just to spread out a bit more evenly across the 10-year plan, or is there sort of stuff that should or needs to happen in those first 3 years?
The big chunk of projects in the first 3 years is car park stage 2 and car park stage 3. Then also on top of that, complex 1's structural upgrade. So we're not sure on the element of risk with that particular building at the moment. We completed complex 2. There were some findings in that complex 2 project. We have got a structural report done, which landed on our desks literally this week. And we've had a quick look at it, and it says we need to get some more structural reports done on that space. So at the moment, I've got a $1.5 million holder in there to decide on what happens there. I think that with those 3 projects alone, that's where the weight is in that first 3 years. And I think that they are the 3 single biggest issues that we face today with the village.
Ultimately, the answer is yes, we can do anything. It just comes with risk. So if we push car parking out, we'll just get lots more noise, people don't go, it doesn't get utilised as much. If we get it done, well, then we solve that problem and kind of move on to the next one. And complex 1, Blair's right, we literally got it this week. We need to go through that, and we might have to make a decision based on risk that we need to move all the tenants out of complex 1, which then has an impact on revenue. We don't know that yet. So again, we kind of planned for, we're probably going to need to do a little bit of work there. But once we actually get under the hood in the next couple of weeks, we might be able to push that out as well, because the risk might be lower. So I guess at this point, until we've got, clarity, we're putting it there as a signal, and happy as we go through the process to look at delaying it if we can, without, creating too much risk.
Thanks, Gareth. In terms of operational costs, where's that at? Is it looking not too different to the current LTP, or where's that heading?
The request is for nothing that's different to the current LTP. I think we've got half an FTE request to help with manning a receptionist presence on site every day, because what we're finding with the skeleton staff we have down there, a lot of the time in terms of actually being able to get on work, they're getting drawn in by the public and the tenants to, hey, I need a hand with this, hey, how do I get here? So that's one thing that we're looking to do, is put a receptionist, 10 till 3 every day, or 9:30 till 2:30 or something. But that's the only ask that's any different from what we're currently doing.
Rod?
It's a bit of an advantage here that we had a big session yesterday, so I got a few facts and figures. So I think you increased your throughput in the village by 20%. I think I worked that out today.
54,000 extra people,
over
so yeah.
250, something like that. So a large increase in numbers. What do you put that down to? Is it the work we've done on the buildings that we've?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we opened Complex 2 last year, so we've had our first full financial year of gate count stuff. It's 3 hospitality outlets in the village now. It's one of them's got a liquor licence, that always helps. A full year of community events and festivals for the first time in a little while, actually, with very little disruption around those events. So, Jazz Festival maxed out, Multicultural Festival got 4.5, nearly 5,000 people through there. And I think the vibrancy of the place, every time we get to do a renewal on a building, we get to change the colour of that building, and it adds another level of vibrancy and wow factor. It's keeping people coming back, it's getting new people coming through. A reasonable cruise ship season is helping with that as well. So, yeah.
Don't underestimate the power of a fairy garden as well.
Saw it for the first time yesterday, loving it.
Hautapu. Well, I'll ask, so do we, again, the car parking is an issue. Have we ever put on buses to get from just for an event, even the Jazz Festival? Do we put on buses?
Yeah, it's up to the event organisers themselves that own those events. So in the case of Multicultural, they have done that. They've arranged with Boys College parking up there. I don't think that's as easy to do now that they've developed some of their parking areas. but there's other opportunities with the racecourse and the likes to be able to park and ride a bus. Like I said, we don't own those larger community events. They're owned by their own entities in their own right. So it's up to them really to supply their own buses, but they have done that to some degree.
But that you could also say, therefore, they can supply their own car parks, and we don't have to. So, I think working with them, because we have possible influence on public transport. Glenn might disagree, but it's just as a destination, I just think it's quite a good thing to be thinking, how do we get people there without them having to drive when there's no car park?
The Ferry Day event was our own, and literally because of the popularity, the first conversation, hate to come back to ferries, but the first conversation we had afterwards was we should put on a ferry bus next year.
Yay.
For that exact reason.
I'll go on the ferry bus.
Yep.
And there's other ways of managing timings as well. Bringing less people in when it opens at 8, do multiple sessions and stuff like that to try and disperse it.
Great. Glenn.
If you could go back to the previous slide, I'll just share with Gareth what I shared with you, Blair, which is that I quite like the medium approach, but I want the lower black little arrow to be by the lowercase m, not on way above the capital M.
That was literally, it's arbitrary. So
in other words, I support it in general, but I think we might have to go a little bit lower than what you're looking at.
Sure.
But I think you're on the right track. In terms of the buses, just to give you an indication, if you want to get there by bus as opposed to walking for half the way, you take 51 minutes, for instance, from in sort of Otomotai area, just as an example, for one way to get to the village. And if you're in the sort of Tauranga South area generally, the on-demand service is going to end soon, and that's been servicing the village. So I think there's a really big issue around public transport. At the very time we're trying to address the transport issues there, the key changes that were planned have all been removed. The infrastructure, the on-demand, and the upgrades to services.
Although I'd suggest if you're able-bodied, you could get dropped on Cameron Road and walk down the street, which would be pretty easy. Yeah.
Hautapu.
Yeah, tēnā kōrua, two things. I'm not opposed at all to kind of what that investment plan looks like. That is all real capital in nature, but I think with what I've experienced, and you two are aware of, is this recorded? It is. Okay, so I'll just try and speak in code, but there are some relational complexities that occur at the village. Do we feel like our current approach to dealing with things as they arise is adequate, or can we improve that to ensure that the experience of vendors and others involved is a good one? It's question one. And the second one is, maybe we already do this, so it'll be a short answer, but like our libraries, in particular our libraries, we have like schools come in and do kaupapa and run programs, and it's a really cool way to activate some of those spaces. Do we do the same thing, acknowledging incubators there, but I guess us as the property manager and owner, do we run education programs or anything to that effect for schools so the place is activated in that sense as well?
Maybe I'll just start and then Blair will clean up the mess. We have a very limited activation budget. I think for the whole of last year it was 20 grand, something like that. So the ability to kind of move into working with schools to provide activations and activities it's quite challenging. And that's where leveraging our partnerships with the likes of the incubator works pretty well. We'd love to do more, but it all comes down to dollars. And I think we do. I think we're pretty creative and do a lot with a little bit. And Blair might be able to add to that. Just in regards to your first question, I think we'd probably just take that conversation offline, because there's some learnings there for everyone in regards to what you're talking about. And a lot of conversation going on the last couple of weeks to try and get to the bottom of how the environment could ensure things like that don't happen again.
I think you did pretty well there, Gareth. We are 4 people at the village. We try to activate the village in a bulk capacity as much as we can, things like fairy gardens and children's days and Halloween and that kind of thing. Getting down to smaller stuff, yeah, we just don't have the resource. We rely on our tenants and we rely on our partners like the incubator and that to be able to activate and do things like that quite heavily. And we rely on the rest of council for everything pretty much. City operations, you know, it's very much takes a village to run a village.
Nice. Sorry, and just final question on that then. That was a great one. So like you've had joined up coordinated conversations with the likes of our events team to leverage their capacity and capability to activate. Yeah.
Absolutely. We lean heavily on those guys when we've got 2,000 people on a Thursday morning coming to look at ferries or whatever. They are on site controlling that and helping with that for sure.
Sorry, I know this is slightly random. Has there ever been an urban frisbee golf? Ever? Because I know that there's some capability at the village who could probably coordinate a really cool event of that nature at a low cost.
I haven't seen you out at McLaren's Falls doing that.
Yeah, I spend quite a bit of time at McLaren's Falls. Actually, there has been. I've got a little, as part of the play trail, we had a person come in and do a little feasibility study to see whether we could create a mini course for 3 to 6, 7-year-olds around the back track through the bush and back out into the village and stuff like that. So we have thought about bigger stuff. There's too many windows, there's too many buildings, and there's too many idiots that throw discs far too far.
Exhibit A.
Exhibit A.
Thank you very much. So that's the direction you needed?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Great.
Really
And
appreciate it.
keep up the good work. We need another 54,000 next year. And there's definitely no short break at the chair's discretion now. We're welcoming Spaces and Places, the highlight of the afternoon.
That sounds like a poison chalice.
No, it's definitely not, Ross.
How do I drive the slides? You're going to do it? Okay, yeah. Okay, let's go. Kia ora koutou. Yeah, so Spaces and Places have direct responsibility for a few AIPs, and then we also, I guess, one of the key implementation arms for some of the other ones as well. Obviously, you heard from Carl earlier around the spatial plans and the urban realm and parks elements of those. So, I'm not going to speak directly to each AIP. I'm just going to essentially assume that you know that those sort of fold into the Spaces and Places CapEx program. Also going to talk or identify event facilities, and there's another session in this program of workshops where we can come back to that with Gareth to get into some of the detail. Obviously not going to talk about that broader community infrastructure program that council has, and I guess specifically Te Manuataki and the historic village that you just heard from Blair on. Yeah, go to the next one. So yeah, I'm just going to give a very broad overview of the program and those budget allocations. So I've had a crack at budget allocations within the financial envelope that we've had guidance from finance on. And we can get into some of the detail on that at this session, but if you have specific things that you want us to come back on, we have got some more time programmed in on the 3rd. And then, as I say, on the 22nd of October, there's a session that's sort of focused on those big facilities that sort of cross over between Spaces and Places and events and economic outcomes as well. Go to the next one. Yeah, thanks. I can't see that, so I'll just go to my notes. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so we're working to
an indicative financial envelope of about 420 million across the LTP to align with that current budget direction.
Sorry, so that is what is currently in the LTP?
So we're plugging numbers into IBIS, the financial planning system at the moment, based on direction that Catherine's team has given us, which is based on the overarching financial envelope direction that you've given them. Right? So it varies from the last LTP 2024, by about 195 million.
As in lower?
Lower, yeah. Yeah. So, again, in the programme that I'm about to show you, there are some key changes there. So I guess to some extent as a provocation, excluded the community stadium budget, which was about 90 million overall, of which about 50% was council money and about 50% was external funders. Obviously, there's a new budget for Moal remediation, which is about $26 million. The Memorial Aquatics budget has reduced from the last LTP. Remember, that was that 124 that it was in the last LTP. So it's now down to the 90, 95, and obviously there's ongoing conversations with the steering group around that.
90, because 5's already been spent.
Correct.
90 left, yeah.
Correct, yep. The programme that you'll see significantly reduces and defers growth-related investment. So that's twofold, really. That is both greenfield-related investment, so that is land acquisition budgets and delivery of community infrastructure in those growth areas. But also then the city centre and intensification budgets. So there was $42 million in the last LTP for the city centre outside of Te Manawataki. So that was those sort of placemaking related initiatives, and about $27 million for intensification related initiatives off the back of the spatial plans. In the programme that you'll see in front of you, that in total comes down to about 20 million across the LTP. So that's one area that you might want to consider movement across. Defers investment in community centres in the east and the west, and that's obviously relates to those growth areas as well, and in the existing city. And there was a placeholder budget for new boat ramps at Sulphur Point. We don't yet have strong evidence and a suitable understanding of how many boat ramps, when they might be needed at Sulphur Point. So there's more work to do there. Obviously, if you bring user fees back in, that may influence the demand, et cetera, down there as well. Additional boat ramps, yeah. In years 1 to 3, as it stands, obviously the focus is on those major projects that you've been considering, the Aquatic Centre, Bay Park being the netball centre, and Pit Lane car park and the surrounding infrastructure there. The arena, and I mentioned Moa remediation, so that adds up to about 185 million and leaves about 35 million for the remainder of the programme across those first 3 years. So it's programme's very top heavy at the moment in those first 3 years, I guess is the simplest way to say it. Can go to the next one. Yeah, so here's the initial breakdown that we've created. Major projects I just talked about, active reserves I've got a slide on, play and recreation I've got a slide on, and local reserves and nature. Just mentioned urban centres and intensification. Event facilities, so that's a mixture of improvements to existing facilities and some new infrastructure. And I think it's probably better if we come back and talk about that in the context of that workshop. So we can present to you the work that Gareth began to introduce you to a couple of weeks ago around the event strategy, but also then the events facilities program as well. Growth corridors. So you'll remember in the east there are a couple of options. One is the Māori land, Tumu Kaituna 14 block, and then the PEI land, and we've been looking at both of those. Obviously, what happens there is highly dependent on those negotiations. So there is money kind of in this, just kind of sat at the end of the LTP for now, that could potentially be brought forwards if those negotiations play out in a particular way. For the western corridor, so Te Riko West, we're essentially talking about land acquisition for play and community centre come library, and then another parcel of land for an active reserve. So again, there is money still in there for that. It's less than was in LTP 2024. And I think it's important to note that there is no money other than for the play facility in Te Riko West for actually building that infrastructure within this LTP. And that's for two reasons, and obviously happy to be challenged and directed differently on that. One is because of the overall financial constraint, and two is because of the timing of broader infrastructure and housing delivery in Te Riko West. So we're trying to align as best we can to the volumes of housing that are going to be in that area and the infrastructure that's going to be in that area to justify those builds and actually to be able to do those builds. Public toilets, there are essentially core public infrastructure. We don't really talk about them very often, except when we're talking about how they're too expensive. But we do recommend that we keep a sort of annual or biannual investment in public toilets throughout the city, and we've got a list, if you want to get into the details there, I've got a list of locations that we would look to roll those out in over that period of time. Community centres, so there was significantly more money in the 2024 LTP for community centre investment. That was threefold really. One, a new community centre in the east, aligned to that broader growth dynamic there. Same in the west, but also under the AIP it was identified that there would be benefit from additional community centre investment within the existing city, and Brookfield was one key area there. We'll need to do something at some point around the cluster of community facilities that there are in Greerton, which are all sort of reaching, sort of getting to end of life at Moreland Fox, the Greerton Hall, etc. So again, here we've just essentially put a placeholder 6 million for a new community centre towards the end of the LTP period. Cemeteries, I think it's largely been traversed. We need to make some investment there over the next 2 or 3 years just to meet those statutory obligations to have enough capacity to bury people. So there's Loop Road investment there and the crematorium build-out. Marine facilities, the budget was that Sulphur Point one I just mentioned. Bay venues also have CapEx budgets in LTP 2024. Those cover 3 or 4 areas. One is a sort of core compliance-related investment line. One is for new sports-related investment, so that's upgrades to existing facilities. One is more sort of events-orientated, and then there's a budget line that is sort of largely focused on the expansion and redevelopment of the high performance centre. So I think if you want to get into the detail on that, that's something that we would need to bring back to you with Bay Venues through one of those 2 workshop sessions, and we can do that. And there you can see the sort of distribution of investment between years 1 to 3 and 4 to 10. Yeah.
Poterifi, is that in that?
Yeah. So
reserves?
I'll jump forward now to the detail on some of the slides. I'm assuming we can sort of leave this one for this session, but if you want, so I'll just give you the arena business case is just about done. So if you want to hear more about that, we could potentially bring some more information to that 3rd of September workshop. But then there'll be a report to council specifically on that business case, seeking direction around the next steps there. If I jump to the next one, sorry, I just tried to click on my own screen there. Yes.
Just on the arena one, I remember we had a meeting there on site, I think with BVL, and they were talking the potential for obviously what we have envisaged, but if there was potential interest from private sector that could be scoped bigger. Is that part of that business case, or have you just stuck to our nuts and bolts now and then get that sorted and then move?
So the business case focuses on the 6-court expansion, but it also then considers how the arena as a whole would best operate in that new environment. So you'll remember we talked about things like the existing 3-court lines, foundation centre, and whether you put a new surface in there, whether you put a new sort of loading bay in there. So it considers those elements. It doesn't consider private or third-party community investment there, beyond obviously the expected co-investment from TECT in making that project happen.
Just on that, because if I remember that discussion we had was around whether that was extended straight out as it was, or whether it was turned 90 degrees and taken back across towards the others.
L-shape definitely looks better.
So, I suppose that would be something that would be interesting to know, even at a high level. I mean, it wouldn't have to be much at all, because then that could, just start discussions that may be, because we do have some parties and groups that, as you probably know, are quite keen for us to support them. It wouldn't be a big part. It might be, but it could easily be a bolt-on later, like you say.
Yeah. So definitely the L shape is looking more promising. It's a lot more efficient structurally.
So just on Bay Park, has Speedway confirmed?
They've signed.
They've signed?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
You.
Tell me about it. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I'll be quite happy to see the end of that one. Active reserves. So this is everything active reserves that isn't in those big sports facilities buckets. So yes, Poterifi is still there. We're working through some of the technical site feasibility information at the moment, and a continuing dialogue with the respective hapu there. Once we've kind of bottomed that out, we'll come back to you and tell you where we're at, and then the intention is to go into that engagement phase that we talked about with stakeholders in the wider community on that project. What we've done there is essentially stagger the investment, again, both to meet the financial envelope, but also it's going to take us a bit of time to get to the outcomes that we want there. For example, sports fields, we've got to get a road in, we've got to put services in, we've got to take out the orchards, we've got to do significant earthworks and then grow in grass, etc., etc. So just to get to a kind of basic level of service outcome is going to take a number of years anyway. So we're trying to phase that program appropriately within the budgets that are available.
But you've got 9 million for 3 years, so 3 million a year, and then the next 7 years you've got quite a lot more than that each year.
Yes, that's correct, and that's really, again, just thinking about the phasing of those major projects versus the rest of the program. So we're assuming that you can begin to accelerate that investment after years 1 to 3 once those major projects are delivered, if that's the direction.
Which are you calling here that are major?
I'm not calling these ones major, although
Well,
Potereef.
no, I'm looking at so you've got on the bottom, 3 million a year, 9 million for years 1 to 3.
Yeah.
And then years 4 to 10,
So-
which is 6 years, you've got nearly 10 million a year.
Yeah, so the largest spend there would be Potereef.
And what's that total spend?
At the moment, we're estimating in the region of about 30.
Okay.
Blake Park, obviously once the netball multi-sport centre is built, we need to go back in there and put the new fields and repurpose what's left of the hardcourt space there. Ferguson Park, notwithstanding the fact that there are limitations just to the amount of additional field capacity that you can get there, there are nonetheless investments that we think need to be made there. Those are threefold, really. One is in additional lighting capacity. To get additional lighting capacity in there, we need to put a new transformer in, so there's a decent chunk of investment there. We've been working closely with the football club and with representatives of the Automotive Sport and Rec Centre there, who have emerging plans to redevelop the facility there. Council has a stake in that as a sort of owner of a bit of the building, sort of legacy issue. The park needs new toilets, and if you've been down there on a bike or walking or in a car, the damage around the front of the site by the harbour is getting quite significant there. So we have a plan essentially to bring the parking onto the field side, and then separate walking and cycling essentially from those cars and from the fields. So that's something that we think will need to happen at some point over the LTP, and again we've kind of staged investment there to allow that to happen. And then eventually, so we've just essentially got a small placeholder budget to bring Merrick's Farm into the Fields network at the end of the LTP period to serve that western corridor.
Does that Ferguson one include artificial turf, or is it just the grass? Because I know the lighting, I know there's, but having been involved in a couple of those meetings, and Glenn has as well, there's considerable uptick in potential usability with lights and that. So yeah, is that part of it?
I'll just declare a conflict of interest first of all, because I am currently a member of Automotive Football Club, over 35's B team. I'd love an artificial turf. One of the issues with artificial turfs are that they constrain other sports. So if we put one in there, it basically means it negates cricket in the space that you put one in there. My initial thought is that Potereef is maybe a better location for an artificial turf, and then.
Yeah, it'd be good. I know you're thinking about that network, but that's timing-wise, it can give us a bit of a buffer or even
Yeah.
Glenn.
No, good point. No, I don't have conflict of interest, but I've looked at there. I think there's a way for a win-win for cricket, because it would take the pressure off the other fields, especially down at the far end from the clubhouse, and it would probably require realigning the number one field. And I think the club is looking at those options if we had funding for it, which comes back to which is the most cost-effective investments out of all the different things. And to me, being the most heavily used reserve, we've also got to factor in resilience. And there's been workshops with the community groups on that. And if it was a raised artificial field, to some extent, you could tick a few boxes, and you would free up the other fields there potentially for more use. And the other comment I make is that given the community demand, I would say, for people sitting, you can just go down there some nights and they're sitting in cars looking out at the beautiful view. I'd like to have a discussion offline about where to put the road and where to put the cycle facility and where to put the parked cars, because it will take away an amenity that a lot of especially older people and families appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. We're still in the planning stages of work down there, and would fully expect to involve you, councillor, and anyone else that wants to be involved in that design process along with the community.
Okay, good. Next slide.
So play we've obviously talked about extensively over the last year or two. This essentially is a reduced programme to align with those budget settings. The other thing that we really want to do that we've talked about with you is broaden that range of play experiences. Obviously, there's been investment over the last year or two and planned over the next year or two, ostensibly in playgrounds, and that's because that needed to happen. But we do want to broaden those play opportunities, wheel sports, potentially some more outdoor fitness equipment, depending on, I guess, how successful the Papamoa pilot project is. We've done a lot more work over the last 6 months looking at opportunities for additional pathway investment, both within reserves and along existing kind of pathway corridors. So, yeah, essentially that investment is scaled to try to maintain as best we can the same kind of level of service that you've largely bought into through those decisions around the play programme. But yeah, that will, while scaling within the existing, within available budget. Next one. So here I've sort of summary combined the reserves and open spaces, AIP and nature and biodiversity programme. This covers a range of things from local investments, the like of which we've made at Bayfair Reserve, where there was that kind of wet, boggy area that we've replanted, through to investments in anything that's not play really in local reserves, so benches and barbecues and the like. And then also it speaks to some of those larger spaces that have ecological, environmental and recreational values, such as the Valley and McLaren's Falls. McLaren Falls needs some renewals plus investment. I've got a little bit more information on that if you want to get into it.
Yes, please.
And
conflict of interest.
And at Tauranga as well. So Tauranga obviously is the battlefield site there adjacent to Merrick's Farm. So that's proposed to be a mixture of planting, car parking, and just essentially trying to bring that space to life as a cultural and historical space.
So just while you're looking at the McLaren's Falls, when we see the barbecues and sometimes they're really busy and sometimes not, have we got a way of measuring the usage of those sort of facilities in our play spaces?
We have to some degree. Some places we have counters. Obviously with things like barbecues, we can tell how much gas has been used. I haven't investigated myself how thorough we are around that analysis. We also do user intercept surveys from time to time. We'll go out round a range of reserves and ask people how they use them, etc. So we do, we certainly use that to inform planning and prioritisation across the network, but there's also that broader kind of spatial planning lens that we put across it. Well, what have we got here, and how can we look to replicate that elsewhere within the city?
So I know, at the Mount, there's quite a lot, so I see them being used. Are they across my councillors? Have you all got them in your areas and are they used from your perspective? Nothing in Matapihi. You're across the whole. You're at the Mount, so you're okay.
Maybe we'll just put that funding in for McLaren's Falls 2029 onwards. Then the Onion can pay for it. You'll be paying for it, Jen.
Sorry, just a question on the barbecues. I've been led to believe that you can't have a barbecue without a toilet block. Is that?
Yes, you can. Go on a taste yep. There's one at Hart Street. There's a barbecue at Hart Street, and the toilets are at Tay Street, which is a kilometre away.
That's a good question. I'm not sure how prescriptive we are about that, but generally there's a correlation between a barbecue and a space that we want people to stay in for longer. And obviously, if you're eating and drinking, you tend to need to go.
It was a request from Gret, and we put in the new park up there, and they said, "Oh, it'd be great if we had a barbecue in here as well." But then the answer was there was no facilities nearby, so.
Yeah, that's certainly the sort of thing that would inform our response to those kind of queries.
So what am I paying for in 2029 in McLaren's Falls, out of my other rates?
Oh, well, just if we do our upgrades after that, then Twiston Bay will pay.
Oh, no, that's what I mean. So I'm just wondering what we're paying for.
So I've got a list of things here, and I'm conscious that we haven't.
Let's do it offline.
I think that might be better actually if we find a time to.
Oh, yeah, no, Rod wants to know too. Excellent.
There's a mixture of things that I'm just going to read a list to you.
Yeah, please.
Sorry. Creation of a bookable space at the information centre, disc golf facilities and expansion, development and formalisation of the second entrance, potentially development of a visitor centre and cafe. I think I've sort of pushed that money out. This is what the team put forwards. No, sorry, it wouldn't be an additional cafe. Track development, including new tracks at 388 McLaren Falls Road, which is the land that was acquired a few years ago. Additional new play space, drinking water and toilets. So it's really around going, what has the space currently got, and what are sensible enhancements that we can make to it to improve the visitor experience or diversify that visitor experience. We have a master plan for McLaren Falls. We just haven't had the opportunity yet to come and talk to you about what that looks like. So we'll try and find that.
It's a fabulous park. Quite well used, and it's got great facilities.
So I think that was my last slide. Yes, sorry, spatial plans. Flows through from the conversation you had with Carl earlier. This just gives a sort of indication of maybe the 3 key projects that we've thought we would look to do within a financially constrained environment in each of those spatial plan areas. So Mount Town Centre Public Realm has been something that we've been looking at for a little while. So that's that Monganoo Road stretch. I mentioned the facilities in Greerton. The hall is old. The facilities at Moreland Fox Park are old. And there's the old Senior Six Club building there. So at some point it's going to be a good idea for us to look at those as a whole. In Otamoitai, beyond Ferguson Park and the investment that's about to happen in the skate park at Carlton Reserve, the further widening of the Beach Road pathway would be the obvious sort of key intervention there.
Good. And what year is your Mount Town Centre upgrade?
Well, at the moment, we haven't got a specific budget line for that. So what we've got per the direction.
Picture of it.
There's a nice photo, yeah. Per the direction that you gave at a previous meeting, what we've got at the moment is 1 million, 1 million, 1 million, and then it rises after year 3 to 7 million or so. In fact, I don't know if I've flowed it through right the way through there, just again to keep within that financial envelope, but that's something you might need to give more direction on. So you can't do a lot for $1 million these days. You could probably do...
Oh, I don't know. Actually, some people could. Council doesn't, maybe.
You could be right. Yeah. So look, absolutely, and we're open to exploring alternative ways of doing some of these works, if that makes sense.
So that stuff at the Mount and the Main Street there, like there must be renewals budget.
Yes.
That isn't it? That's
No, that would be new capex, but absolutely we'd look at bundling renewals investment with new capital.
So have we started discussions with, say, Main Street or someone about what that looks like?
I know that there were initial conversations a little while ago, because I know that we've got some very early kind of concept designs around, for example, work around the tree pits and the circular, the curved seating there. But that's something that we would need to bring back to the surface and prioritise. I think probably the way to go, once you have settled on the level of investment that you're comfortable with across the spatial plan areas, we can then also talk to you about prioritisation across those areas and provide a bit more detail around investment requirements.
So just to Jeremy, when does that happen? And looking at the renewals for the next 3 years, because again, like we're talking about a Mount Town Centre and perhaps only being $1 million there, but, well, I'm not going to say that because that wasn't what you said. There won't be a whole lot, but there will be some renewals in there. And again, when we're looking holistically across our city, those renewals are quite important in terms of what spend that is available. So when do they come back to us?
We have a workshop planned, I'm just trying to think of the date, for capital and prioritisation, and we can make sure that there's some detail about the breakdown of those renewals by activity, but normally the detail within that renewal is held separately with the activity managers, so
I would say if you want specific information, for example, on what it might cost and what the breakdown between renewals and new capital might be for those Mount Town Centre improvements, we can dig out the work that we've done already and give you at least a kind of order of magnitude.
Well, even if that comes by email, that would be really good, please, Ross. Renika.
We have a workshop, and I can't remember the date off the top of my head either, about the asset management plans. Now, they don't have a direct correlation with the asset management plan. Will say you spent X on renewal in Y year, but it tells you how we prioritise assets for renewal. And that is quite often a live or inspection-based regime. So for an LTP, the renewal, the further out you go, simply won't be known.
That's what I said,
right?
Years 1 to 2 is all we're talking about.
But the asset management plan workshops that we are going to have will be the place where we talk about the methodology of prioritising. So if you're not happy with the type of prioritisation when you see the detail, hold on to those questions or let us know those questions so we can address them in that workshop.
And I think that where I struggle is that, well, what's our total renewals budget is, looking at Mahe? Yeah, let's say it's 100 million, and 80 million will be just doing whatever you have to do on waters and roading and things, but where we might have 15 to 18 million on renewals and spaces and places, that's actually really important, because that says that you're going to renew those two a playground in Welcome Bay and one in Papamoa, but not have to build new ones. But so we tend to have these workshops, and we're talking 100 million, and 80 million is all we talk about. But the 20 is actually something we can do something about and can prioritise. So that's just something we'd like, please. And if Ross, if you're able to give us a little bit around that. Because I remember when we had a workshop a while ago on playground renewals, it was fabulous, but it was the first time we'd actually seen that and understood how much actually is invested into playground renewals, for example. So that's an action for Ross. And then Rod.
Sorry, just a suggestion. I think that's a good example that you could use in your workshop, like specifically the Main Street revitalisation, whatever you want to call it, because it's something that Main Street have brought up a couple of times about how tired it's looking and some of the stuff they want to do.
100%, yeah.
You could actually use that as a really good example, I think.
Have we stump ground the stumps yet and cleaned up the gardens on Mount Main Street?
I haven't seen it happening.
Okay.
You know, they raised it 6 months ago, and they've said it's been on the card. It's been a request for a year or two. We took trees out and then didn't take the stumps out.
Yeah, sorry, I'm aware of what you're talking about. I'll have to follow up and find where we've got to.
Yes,
Okay, I'll do that.
Thank you. And so I'm just going to have as an action for Ross to provide breakdown of renewals across spaces and places, which is really only maximum 2 years.
So if I just jump back up to the top, is there anything that I've mentioned that you want to hear more about in more detail that I haven't kind of said, yeah, we'll bring that back? So I've said that we'll come back with that events and bay venues package.
Keep going. Yep.
And I've said that I'll come back with,
I reckon, can you go just make sure we're covered on the major projects? So that 185 you're talking about in this slide, that's covered in the next slide.
yes,
One more, Quinn. Yeah. So that is 185, is it?
that's an inflated number, but yes.
Is that adding up, Mahe?
Well, I can,
Yeah, I think once you get inflated and everything else it would be.
Okay, then go back one, Quinn, please. Okay, so that's our 185, and the rest, I mean, basically, I think around this table, we want as much as we can get without having to spend more than we've got. And that's what we've got to figure out how we do, right? Well, it's, we joked about public toilets, but we just need to know that, yes, we have to do public toilets, but there's a cost that we know is able to be allocated per public toilet, and we're just not just doing something more than that. Where we've got the cemeteries, I know the Mayor will be looking closely at what we're spending on the cemetery. And so it's, we want nice things to happen in the city, but we've just got to be sensible about at what scope those nice to haves, or those not nice to haves, those community requirements are built for. And the renewals we've got to spend on them. Glenn.
I would appreciate just getting a bit more understanding of our commitments in Tarika West in terms of, I raised it earlier around the hearings that took place, and they were really honed in on that issue of when we will provide infrastructure, and it needed to not be late, it needed to be earlier on time, and what that means, what the current scenario is, and that might be more of a question for Andy. And then the other one is you mentioned Brookfield Community Centre. There might be potential scope for sort of collaboration with churches or something like that in terms of the physical infrastructure. But the Papamoa East is one that sort of, when I look through what's planned here, that worries me, because we've got, two high needs areas and Gate Pa and Merivale being sorted, but not Papamoa East and as I say, Brookfield. So it'd be good to understand what the cost, what the budget is and the timing, because for me there's a question mark still a little bit around the major projects budget versus more bang for buck potentially from community level projects.
Steve's plan.
Oh, yeah. So I think real interest in this area, Ross, and the more you can, the more we know about it and can keep giving you direction, the better. Thank you very much.
Which leaves us with 2 minutes just to get on to the next one. So
2 minutes? I'm giving you 27 minutes.
I can do 27 minutes on these slides if you want to, but it'll be quite painful. I intend taking 2 minutes of your time.
Thank you.
So thank you. There's a bunch of direction there across a range of topics. Some was stronger than others, but what we'll do is we'll take what we've got as far as the direction, and unusually we won't be bringing all these things back with council reports. Most of these workshops precede a formal council report. A lot of this is just going to go back into the machine. You will see Ross again in a week's time and again in October as he fleshes out some of that's spaces and places work. We will build this into budgets. We've obviously got draft budgets already underway, which Catherine is crunching through. If there's different direction from today, there'll be a little tweak there. The next time you'll see a lot of that will be in October when we bring the activity plans to you, which will be effectively a summary of everything in each activity. So we'll take the climate one from earlier on. Here's a summary of the words, here's a summary of the risks, here's a summary of the projects, here's a summary of the numbers. It all comes together in one place. At that stage, we go back, almost back around the cycle again. If there's things you don't like, we have another go at it. Quinn's got the actions from the meeting today. There's quite a few of those, which is cool. We'll work back on that, feed them back into the organisation. And the next slide just says we will see you again, which starts on next Thursday. So we've got State Highway 2 next week, we've got walking and cycling next week, more Ross, and Jim starts to bring some of the rates stuff to you as well. So the machine carries on. It'll carry on at this pace, and it'll probably pick up pace over the next 2 or 3 months. Thank you for your time and attention.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I took a few notes and I've just sent them through. Pardon?